Hey there, I'm Richy, and in this video, we're going to be checking out Fifine's H series of wired gaming headsets. Fifine was very nice and sent out all three, the H6, the H9s, and the H13s out to me, but in no way does that affect any of the things that I say or opinions that I make in this video. But with that disclaimer out of the way, I do want to say that my previous Fifine products have been pretty dang good, and as a company, they do very well at bridging the gap between budget and quality product. So without further ado, let's get into the review. First things first, you are able to pick up all three of these headsets on Amazon, which is where I actually picked up mine, and all of them are available in a couple different colors to a few different colors. But for the information I know you want to know but really don't want to hear, the price. So the H6s and the H9s are coming in at just under the $60 price point in Canadian, and then the H13s are coming in around $85 or $86 Canadian. In my opinion, these prices are fine, and it really does depend on the build quality and the functionality of the headset to determine if they are actually worth that price. But with that out of the way, let's get into the unboxings now. Alrighty, so before we get to any actual reviewing, let's just go over what's included with each of these headsets. Don't worry, it's not too much. For the H6s and the H13s here, it's just the headset, the detachable mic that's included for each of them, and then a manual. But for the H9s here, because this inline control dock is actually detachable, you get the headphones that can be used for aux and as well as USB. So that's a pretty big bonus there. And then I'm also just going to throw this out there. The cables on these are pretty dang long, if not too long. So you shouldn't really have an issue there if that's what you're worried about. And then hopping on the PC, the last thing I wanted to show you before I get to any testing is that I'm not changing the integrated EQs at all. Each of these profiles that I'm pushing sound through are flat profiles, and I'm just using SteelSeries Sonar to split up the audio. But now that that's done, let's get into the first headset. Starting with the H6s, this is the cheapest of the three, so it is safe to assume that this is the baseline model where all the others work off of and improve on. But diving right in and looking at the build quality first, it's actually shockingly good. Like, yeah, I'd be able to snap it if I was really trying to, but in normal use, the H6s are actually quite solid. I'm able to bend them a lot here, and then going down to the cups here, the piece that runs into the spine that allows you to adjust it is very strong. It's a very solid metal piece, and there's no bending there. And the notches on each of the spots are nice and defined and not loose at all. So the size that you set it at is going to stay, and it's not going to change. And really, even this version being the cheapest of the three, I can only complain about right here on the ear cups because I can feel out of the whole headset, this is the only spot that seems like it's only plastic, and it's the one spot that I feel a little hesitation on pushing it to its limits. But there, I don't think you should be pushing it to your limits unless you're like throwing it at the ground. But now let's actually talk about how the H6s feel on the head. This aspect, I will say, isn't really a strong suit for the H6s. The cushions are okay. They aren't the most firm, but they aren't too soft and are really what you would expect from a budget headset. But then pairing them with the little bit of high clamp force that you get out of this top headband, my ears are actually touching the back of the ear cups, and in long play sessions, my ears do feel pretty scrunched up inside of these cups. Also, the cushions are just big enough for my ears to get inside of them, or just for big enough for them to go around my ears. So I kind of have to find that perfect spot for them to sit, or else part of my ear feels pinched between the cushion and the back of my head. To give some credit though, the over the top of the headset, the spine here, the padding is very good, and it's definitely enough to make any feeling on the top of my head very comfy. And then the cups, the ability for them to swivel is good enough that they actually conform to the shape of my head pretty well, making a good seal. But the depth of the cushions and just the size of the cups, making them not really usable for long durations, is definitely something that makes me have to take them off every so often. So for this aspect, I would have to say the H6s could definitely use some improvement, but just by looking at the H9s and the H13s, it looks like they knew that the comfort was a bit of an issue. Now for the features and functionality of the H6s, I have just plugged them into my PC, but this is a USB headset for Mac and PC only, so there is no aux port that's included or anything with it. But then moving up the line here to this inline control dock, this part has 3 integrated EQ modes, and it depicts what they do on the back here. Can't really see it that well. Then there's also the 7.1 surround sound mode that you can turn on and off. These 2 features I do have a little bit to say about because I have used this headset, but I'll get back to that in a little bit. There's also a inline volume controller that you can just turn up and down, and you can also mute the mic for the headset on the side here. Oh, the mic is also detachable as well, which is a pretty cool thing that I honestly think is pretty overlooked in the market today. But honestly, I do think this is a pretty solid package here. It's easy to use, very plug and play. I was able to unbox this, plug it in, and use it all within 2 minutes. I do wish though that there was a button to turn off this RGB or at least change it in some way, because personally I'm not the biggest RGB fan, so I would like any sort of customization there. But seeing it as the cheapest pair, it is not the most noticeable thing on that side. Now, just before we get to the sound quality of H6s, let's talk about the included mic while using the mic. Honestly, it's not that bad for a headset mic. Like, I can definitely tell the difference between the mic I was using before and this one, but as far as headset mics go, I am pretty pleased with this one. The gooseneck is malleable, but still quite firm and stays exactly where you put it, and I'm not worried of it breaking at all. Also, the sound of it is pretty rich for such a small capturing device, plus this thing is removable. So honestly, this is a pretty nice cherry on top for this headset in my opinion. Now for the sound quality of the H6s, there's definitely some room for improvement. To start though, I will say that the ear cups are actually pretty good at noise isolation and passive noise cancellation. Plus, it's a very good thing that there are 3 integrated EQ modes and a 7.1 surround sound mode. So you get good options there and good customization, but when the base EQ of the headset isn't the best to start, it makes all those other EQs that build off of it a lot harder to hear any difference out of. So that leads me to what I was saying before, and what I wanted to mention about the EQs is that really each one of them is just a louder version of the last one, but with just a little bit of a hint of what they wanted to add. The gaming mode is just a bass boosted mode to the Mac, and it makes each bullet sound feel like meaty, and it sounds like a kick drum. Then both the music mode and the movie mode sound like a little fuzzy around the edges, and it's like each lyric or sentence said is just a bit blurry to my ears, and to compensate for that, they just raise or lower the volume of each EQ. Then for the 7.1 surround sound mode, this is an interesting case because most of the time it makes everything feel a bit farther away and have a kind of underwater sensation to it, but then sometimes it's actually kind of believable. I can get a decent sense of directionality out of it, but more often than not, it's better for music without vocals. So that aspect of the headset is kind of wishy-washy, but for a $60 pair of headphones, this is a pretty fair implementation, I'd have to say. So to wrap this up on the H6s, to me, they are meh. Like, for this price, I can definitely find worse headphones, but then I could most likely find a few better ones. However, there are some things with the H6s that stand out to me. The build quality is a pretty obvious one because this is pretty damn good for a $60 pair of headphones. And then all the options with the EQ and the surround sound plus the detachable mic are all very nice touches. So really there is appeal to the budget gamer who needs an overhead pair of headphones and wants the most out of their product. But in my most honest of opinions, for this sound quality, a pair of IEMs, half this price, and a software like SteelSeries Sonar will definitely make you as happy with the sound quality. While you might sacrifice comfort just a little, you will probably be as happy with that audio. I warn you though, the rabbit hole of IEMs goes very deep. Anyways, on to the H9s now. For the H9s, this is the middle option of the three headsets, and just by looking at them, it does seem like they have forfeit the RGB and a few features from the H6s, but they've also added in a couple different things. Just like the H6s though, let's start with the build quality of the H9s. Much like the H6s, I am actually quite surprised at the strength of this headset for this price. The spine, like the H6s, is one that is very sturdy and gives me plenty of confidence. The only thing, just like on the H6s as well, is the hinges on each cup. They don't really seem to have made much of an improvement across the different versions, and it is still the only part of the headset that doesn't give me the much confidence. There is one difference though that I have noticed is on this cable here heading to each cup, there's actually a little rubber nib that does get in the way a little bit of the range of motion. That does sum it up for the build quality though. The H9s are very similar to the H6s, at least for that aspect, but coming over to the capabilities and functionality, they've actually taken away the integrated EQ modes on the inline control hub, but in turn, this one is now detachable. So that allows you to use the H9s for aux and USB inputs. So this is a much more versatile headset, at least in the case of usability. But actually getting to that inline control dock, let's talk about what's included on here. So as I mentioned before, they did take away a couple functions, and that would be the integrated EQs on here, but in turn they've added a little bit more control for your headset volume itself, and then also some more control for the mic volume. On the H6s, you can't really control the volume of the mic, you can only control the volume of the headset. You can just mute and unmute the H6 mic, while on the H9s you do get full control of how loud that volume gain will be, and you also still get the 7.1 surround sound audio. For the comfort aspect of the H9s, I will say it is quite similar to the comfort of the H6s. Both have a very nice top cushioning, and I don't have any issues with that during long play, but there is something that they have changed, and I mentioned it earlier, is that this little plastic nub on each of the ear cups for the wire does actually interfere with the cup's range of motion. While it doesn't seem like the biggest issue, for me I found that it does leave a gap on the bottom of each ear cup because it doesn't make the cups conform to my head as well, and it affects more than just the comfort. But if I had to round it down and just bring it to the comfort aspect, I would say the H6s are a little bit better just because they fit my smaller head shape better. But if your head is more normal sized than mine, I would say the H9s might be a better option if they can sit more flat on your head. For the mic quality of the H9s, I genuinely think it's the exact same one as the H6s, or at least the capturing capsule is. So the quality of the sound and the quality of the input sounds exactly the same to me as the H6s, but in my opinion, the gooseneck on the H6s is a little bit better, and it's a lot more firm, and I can't accidentally bump it as much as I do on the H9s. So I'm not really sure why they would change that mic from the H6s, because it did give me a bit more confidence in its build quality, but this mic is still good, it moves around, and the gooseneck is malleable to any point that you would need. Getting to the sound quality of the headphones themselves though, due to the fact that the ear cups don't conform to my head as well as the H6s, it does actually affect how good the passive noise cancellation and how well the cups isolate any of that noise, which does make it pretty hard to hear subtle noises like footsteps or reloading noises or any subtle noises that help you get a little bit of information. Even with that though, I can tell that the drivers used on the H9 are a little bit better than the ones in the H6s, or maybe that the bass EQ on the drivers is better than the ones on the H6s, because overall the sound quality on the H9s is just better than the H6s. Voices come out more clear, distinct sounds are more defined, and then the integrated 7.1 surround sound is a little bit better in my opinion. While the 7.1 surround sound still has a little bit of that underwater or kind of muffled sound to it, I do get more moments of directionality and just more depth to the ambiance. So for this aspect of audio, I can tell there are definitely a few improvements made to the bass audio, or at least made to the H6's audio, but with this headset you do technically get less options because you don't get those built-in EQs, and in my personal experience it does sound like the sound is escaping from the cups because they don't conform to my head. But that is really just a size issue, and it could be different for a lot of other people. So to sum things up for the H9s, I will say if this review was purely based on audio, I would actually lean towards the H9s rather than the H6s here, because I think with a simple EQ software, you could actually lead the H9s to a much better audio standpoint than the H6s. But just because of this little rubber piece on the back of each ear cup, it really does ruin the comfort aspect for me at least, and doesn't let the cups conform, leaving a gap on the bottom of each ear cup, letting a lot of noise out. Now, to give credit where credit is due though, I actually really enjoy this change of having the detachable inline control dock, because that just opens up a lot of doors for more usability and allows you to use this headset on more things like your phone or on a handheld gaming device, anything like that, rather than just locking you to a USB. But if I was looking at that aspect as the only direct improvement to the H6s, I do feel like they could have done a bit more improving. Anyways though, let's get to the H13s. And finally, the last, but definitely not the least, we have the H13s. And just taking them out the box and plugging them in, it looks like they've taken most of the good from both the H6 and the H9s and put them all into the H13s here. But just like the others, let's start with the build quality first. And this one does continue the trend of giving me a lot of confidence in the whole headset, except for, again, the hinges here, because they are full plastic. I'm also seeing that this one does have a little nib on the cable, but it doesn't seem to limit the range of motion actually, since the nib doesn't even hit the metal piece when moving. So that is a good thing that I'll have to check into. But getting into the capabilities of the H13, we have this inline control dock, which also has integrated EQs, much like the H6s, but you get the option to turn them off entirely by holding the button down, and it goes to a flat EQ profile. And then you also have volume rockers here to control the volume of the headset itself, and then also a rocker to control a game and chat mix. And then still on the control dock, you get that 7.1 surround sound audio mode, much like the other versions. And then there's also this mute switch here for the mic, and then a noise cancellation button to close things out. All of this is on the control dock here, but moving up to the headset, much like the other ones, you get the detachable mic that you can take in and out, and then also you get a button to control the RGB here, so that just controls the lighting colors on the outside. All in all, I'm not just saying this because it is the most expensive version of this headset, but I'm saying the H13s really are jam-packed with features, and the only thing, in my opinion, that is lacking that I've seen from the other ones is the ability to detach the dock itself, which really is a shame when it comes to usability. Moving on to the comfort category of the H13s, this pair I'd have to say is actually really good, because where the H9s fell short, I find that the H13s really solve it. And like I said before, that little rubber thing on the top here isn't limiting any range of motion on the cups, so I'm able to actually get the headphones to conform to my head much better, making a much better seal around my ears. Then moving on, the cushions are also great too. They have enough gives so it doesn't feel like they are completely solid and completely tough, but they are firm enough where my ears don't touch the back of the cups at all. And then much like the other version of the headsets, the top padding here is also very well done. So honestly, when testing the H13s, I was actually able to fall asleep with these on my head while I was watching a movie. So it's safe to say I had no issues with the comfort of these ones at all. And then for the mic quality, I think they really are just recycling the mics across all the versions. Well, at least the capturing capsule, because when testing this one, it did sound the exact same as the other ones. So I'm not even gonna show it here. And even just swapping the mics between the headsets, I couldn't tell the difference. But for the sound quality of the H13s, I can really tell the difference there. Because thanks to the cups actually being able to conform to my head and make a good seal, the sounds actually seem much better and more isolated. While I think the drivers on each of these cups is the same ones as the H9s, the build of this pair really does optimize the experience for me. Then coming down here, getting to the integrated EQs, these ones are actually more effective, I'd have to say, and they don't just raise the volume between each option. Well, it's not an incredible difference between each option. I can definitely tell the EQs, like the music mode, the game mode, and the movie mode, definitely have some differences to them, and it actually adds to each scenario rather than distracting you from what's intended in the show or in the game. So one of the best examples is I'm able to define footsteps from gunfire much easier on the H13s than on the H9s or on the H6s. There's also a noticeable improvement on the 7.1 surround sound mode because it doesn't make things sound like I'm underwater anymore, but instead there's actually more depth to each audio and it gives body to each noise. The one thing I have a real issue with though in this audio category is the noise cancellation mode on these headphones, because I generally don't think it does anything. Even with no sounds playing, no audio on my headphones, usually you hear that cancellation, like the little hum of the white noise, but on these, it's nothing. So really, I just think it's this light turning on and off rather than actually a function. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention about the H13s before I sum everything up is this chat mix here on the side. This isn't really a big thing, but in my opinion, it is well done. The volume rocker itself has a very clear midpoint that physically tells you where each volume meter starts for the chat or for your in-game audio. But now that brings me to my final opinion, and on the H13s here, I'd have to say these ones are the ones I could most recommend out of all three of the headsets. It can do the most and it can do well at that. While it's not the best I've ever heard, it's for sure not the worst in this price range. And some of the features like the EQ and the 7.1 surround sound are done well enough where it actually enhances the audio even if it's just a little. The only thing that makes me not want to recommend this pair is the price. While I guess I can see why these are $20 more than the other ones, I honestly feel like that price gap could be a little bit smaller in the end, but that is just my opinion. But to bring this all to a close, I will say this series of headsets is pretty good. There are things that you don't often see on a headset like the integrated EQs and the 7.1 surround sound mode, but honestly, I would have liked to see a bit more of an even spread of pricing across all three of these headsets, or at least a little bit more put into the H9s, because I feel like this pair could do for a little bit more refining, and then I'd be able to recommend these ones as well. But as for now, the only pair out of the three that I would be able to recommend is the H13s. While the H6s and H9s are a good place to start with if you can't get your hands on the H13, in comparison, they still do lack some functionality and a little bit of overall performance. But in the end, I will admit, each of these headsets do fill a role, and if either of those headsets are your first pair, I don't think you will be disappointed. Anyways though, that is all I have to say about Fifine's H series of headsets, and I wanted to extend a big thank you out to Fifine for sending these out to me just to try them out. And if you wanted to pick up any of the versions, the US and the Canadian links will be in the description below. But like always, if you found this video helpful, please do leave a like as it helps the video get out there, and subscribing helps build the channel. With everything said though, thank you for clicking on this video, thank you for sticking around, and it's ta-ta for now.